February the 19th. My name is Brad Mitchell, and I'm the chair of the PAC. I'll start the meeting by giving a brief overview of what the Planning Advisory Committee's mandate is, as well as a breakdown of how the meeting will progress. The Planning Advisory Committee consists of 9 citizens of St. John who have been appointed by the city's nominating committee. Our role is to provide advice to Common Council on applications to amend the municipal development plan, zoning bylaws or Section 59 conditions, subdivision proposals, along with a number of other possible issues. Our views and opinions are independent. Tonight's meeting will progress as following. Shortly, the committee will vote to adopt the agenda for this evening's meeting. Following the adoption of the agenda, we'll do a roll call for the members of the committee. Then we'll approve the minutes for the previous PAC meeting and declare any conflicts of interest for tonight, for this evening's items. We will then go through this evening's applications and follow that agenda until it is complete. For each item, city staff will provide an overview presentation. Following this, the applicant will be asked to address the committee. Once the applicant has finished their presentation, the committee may ask follow-up questions. We will then open the public hearing where any members of the public are welcome to address the committee. Each speaker has 10 minutes. We ask that you please avoid repetition of concerns or viewpoints. If you have a large group, we encourage the delegation of a single presentation representative speakers. Once it's your turn to speak, you are called up to the pedestal. The committee may have questions for you following your address. Please note the committee has read any letters or comments submitted for this meeting, which I believe we have one. The committee may ask the applicant to return to respond to any comments that arise during the public hearing. After this, the public hearing section is closed. No further comments may be made by the public or the applicant. At this point, there may only be questions or of clarification to city staff by the committee. Please remember that this is a safe space and that we ask for everyone to conduct themselves in a respectful manner. Should anyone interrupting the proceedings will receive one warning, refrain from disrupting the meeting. Should disruptions continue, they will be asked to leave the meeting. Members of the public, you are welcome to remain in the chambers to listen to the debate and decision of the committee. However, when your item is concluded, you may leave. Should you have any follow-up questions, please contact city staff. Now let's move forward tonight's meeting. So we have the agenda. Do I have a motion to accept tonight's agenda? Phil and Ann. And I'll do a roll call. Oh, I guess the question, all those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Roll call. I'm the chair, Brad Mitchell. First vice chair, Phil Como. Second vice chair, Ann McShane. Councillor Jerry Lowe. Councillor Gary Sullivan. Josephine Chekwas. Peter Pappas. Absent is Terry Hutchison and Ashima Eldamari. Next, I'll ask for any conflict of interest for any items for tonight's meeting.
Conflict for 5.3.
Thank you. Phil? Any other? Thank you. Next, I'll ask for approval for the minutes of January 21st. Ann? Gary? Any question? All those in favor? Thank you. So our first application this evening, item 5.1. 5.1 is Waterloo Street. The applicant on this item is Jill Higgins and Milton Lynn. Landowner is Hospital Hill Development Limited. Location is 211 Waterloo Street, PID 55203137. Land designation is medium to high density residential. Zoning is general commercial. The application type is variance to the subdivision bylaw. The Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to grant reasonable variances from certain requirements of the subdivision bylaw. Terms and conditions can be applied. I'll ask Thomas, please make your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, this application is proposing to subdivide the subject site into 2 parcels for a phased mixed-use and residential development. The applicant is seeking approval from the committee to allow for the creation of 2 lots along an existing private street. Subject site is located along a private street in Waterloo Village neighborhood between Waterloo Street and City Road. This area of Waterloo Village is located between the residential institutional uses to the south and the commercial uses to the north, located along City Road. Agar Place is an existing private road that is located off Waterloo Street and provides access to municipal services to 1 Agar Place and as well as the 2 proposed lots in the future. The photo on the left is the end of Agar Place, which currently terminates into a bulb, and the photo on the right is Agar Place heading southeast towards Waterloo Street. Subject site is zoned general commercial. Staff have confirmed that the proposed lots conform to the zone standards of the CG zone and that no rezoning is required. Proposed development aligns with the general commercial zone and must comply with the zoning bylaw at the time of permitting. Subdivision bylaw requires PAC approval for any newly created lot that does not abut a public street. It should be noted that Agar Place, the existing private street built to public standards and part of the parent parcel, contains water, sewage, and stormwater infrastructure that will be extended to serve the proposed lots during development. Letters were mailed out to property owners within 100 meters of the subject site on February 7th, 2025, and no letters were received as of this presentation. As the proposed subdivision meets the requirements of the zoning bylaw and the subdivision bylaw, staff recommend the granting of the requested variance to create 2 lots, Lot 2025-1 and Lot 2025-2, which will not abut a public street. Thank you.
Questions for staff? At this point, I'll ask the applicant if they'd like to come forward. And if you'd like to come forward and state your name and if you've read staff recommendation and agree with it.
I think staff did a great job.
All right. Is anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? Anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? Just to clarify, because he didn't come up to the podium, that he did notify and said that he was agreed with staff recommendation. Colleen, thank you. At this point, I'll close public presentation. I get a motion or a. We have a move and a second. Any question? All those in agreement? Any opposed? Pass unanimously. Thank you. Oh, wait, you guys are in a hurry tonight. Item 5.2. Text amendment. The applicant is the City of St. John, zoning bylaw amendment. Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council concerning proposed amendments to the zoning bylaw. Common Council will consider the committee recommendation at a public hearing on Monday, March 24th, 2025. Growth and Community Services has initiated a bylaw amendment to expand the range of zones that permit crisis care facilities as a use. The intent is to create opportunities for the development of crisis care facilities on utility service sites, consistent with the approach of allowing such uses in commercial areas. Please.
Good afternoon. So as introduced before you today is a proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw put forth by Growth and Community Services. So the crisis care facility use provides short-term accommodation to a person in crisis requiring immediate lodging. Since the adoption of the zoning bylaw in 2014, there's been a variety of zones that allow this use. In 2022, after Common Council endorsed the city's Affordable Housing Action Plan, there was an amendment to allow for it in more residential and commercial zones. And before you today is another amendment to allow for the expanded use of this use as well. This is also paired with a text amendment to the definition that will provide the ability to establish supervision requirements in a context-specific manner, an amendment to the parking to also allow for context-specific requirements. So the proposed amendment is in line with the Housing for All strategy, and this strategy was adopted in July 2024, and it was to provide safe community spaces for access by all residents while supporting individuals as they access housing that meets their specific needs. Through expanding the zone in which the crisis care facility is a permitted use, it broadens the sites that can be considered for this type of use without undergoing a rezoning process. Crisis care facilities are often established due to a specific need of a community and may be required within a short time frame. And there's a direct benefit in ensuring that there's a diverse range of sites that could be activated in a timely manner. This amendment will allow for the use to be allowed in the utility service zone, and then paired with that text or the definition and the amendment to the parking. So as said, the largest piece of this is the amendment to allow for it in the US, which is the utility service site, and the utility service zone is intended to accommodate a range of utility and service infrastructure, and these sites are often owned and maintained by the city or large utility providers. There are sites across the city as shown above. Some of them are quite small but fully developed, while there are some other larger vacant lots. As these sites largely support the infrastructure and utility needs of the city, a rezoning to a zone that would permit crisis care facility may not be feasible, which is why we are listing it to allow for the use as of right. And the inclusion of the crisis care facility as a permitted use, it helps establish more sites where this could be used, often owned by the city, and that could quickly be activated when an immediate need arises. Since this is a text amendment, the only public engagement is the website ad for council public hearing on March 24th, which will be posted before March 3rd, and we have had no letters submitted. So in summary, staff are recommending that council adopt the attached bylaw amendment, which would allow for the crisis care facility use in the utility service zone. It would also change that text amendment, it would have a text amendment to the definition of crisis care facility, and it would have an amendment to the parking to remove it from that one stall per employee to the discretion of the development officer. And as said, these amendments do align with our Housing for All strategy adopted last year and will provide a key support to action items in the strategy. And this just really provides additional locations for the establishment of crisis care facilities in a flexible and timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee have any questions for staff on this? I'll look for a recommendation or a motion. But are we having a public hearing? Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this? This is text amendment, so we still have to have public? Okay. Sorry, I am rushing it. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this matter? Third and final call, if there's anybody else that would like to speak on this. Now I'll close public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to make a motion or a recommendation or a question at this time?
I'll move staff recommendation.
I'm seconded by Jerry. Any question? All those in favor? Aye. Sorry about that. Item 5.3. 801. Yeah. The applicant is Hughes Surveys and Consultants, Inc., Landover Scott Brothers, Inc., Limited. Location is 801 Loch Lomond Road. PID is a portion of 00436659. The existing plan is Regional Retail Center. Existing zoning is Business Park Commercial. Proposed zoning, Commercial Corridor. The application type is rezoning. Community Planning Act authorizes the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council concerning proposed amendments to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw. Common Council will consider the committee's recommendation at a public hearing on March 24th, 2025. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, the proposal requires rezoning a portion of the property identified as 801 Bayside Drive, or PID 00436659, from Business Park Commercial to Corridor Commercial to permit the development of an animal shelter run by the SPCA. Following a successful rezoning, a subdivision would be required to separate the newly zoned 1.32 hectare site from the parent parcel. This would be done at the staff level. Subject property is situated along Loch Lomond Road on the east side of the city between Commerce Drive and McAllister Drive. The subject property is a vacant lot and is surrounded by current commercial uses. The commercially zoned area acts as a buffer between the industrial lands to the south of Loch Lomond Road and the residential neighborhoods located off Mark Drive and McAllister Drive, respectively. It's a photo of the access for the proposed lot. Would be approximately located where the sign indicating 37 acres is located. The subject site is currently located within the regional retail center designation and more specifically, the McAllister Regional Retail Center. McAllister Regional Retail Center is one of the two major regional retail centers in the city, which provides commercial, retail, and service-based uses intended to serve all of southwestern New Brunswick. Policy I-2 of the municipal plan is concerned whether rezoning and associated development are appropriate. Considering the requirements of Policy I-2, the development will not impose any financial burden to the city, as it will use municipal water and private wastewater services due to the absence of municipal sewers on this part of Loch Lomond Road. It is also situated on a major arterial road and aligns with surrounding commercial uses. Policy LU61 of the municipal plan requires careful consideration of development within regional retail centers and that it should not detract from the city's primary centers. This development complies with the fact that the proposed land is unsuitable for primary centers due to its need for open space for animals. The site is effectively buffers between heavy industrial and residential uses, and the site will be landscaped to complement nearby commercial uses. Again, the subject site is currently zoned Business Park Commercial. The Business Park Commercial Zone accommodates areas that are generally identified for employment uses, including business offices, research and development facilities, as well as light manufacturing and assembly. The applicant is seeking to rezone the property from Business Park Commercial to Corridor Commercial due to the fact that the Business Park Commercial Zone does not permit the use of an animal shelter, while the Corridor Commercial Zone does. Letters were mailed out to property owners within 100 meters of the subject site on February 7th, 2025. No letters were received as of this presentation. The public notice will be posted on the city website on March 3rd, 2025, and the public hearing date is scheduled for March 24th, 2025. Staff are recommending that Common Council rezone the approximately 1.32 hectare portion of 801 Loch Lomond Road from Business Park Commercial to Corridor Commercial to prevent the development of an animal shelter run by the SPCA. Thank you.
Thank you. Many members have any questions for staff on this? Yes? Please go ahead, Ann.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'm not on, but I don't know. Yeah, the only question I have is about commercial corridor. Are there any uses that would extend to that wouldn't be suitable for a buffer like this? If it wasn't an animal shelter?
Do you mean the surrounding uses that are existing?
Like if
or?
is commercial corridor, like that designation, that zoning, are there any uses that are allowed within that zoning that wouldn't be appropriate for this, that are a little too much for this buffer area?
I would say no. It's generally seen as a transitionary zone as it is. You have like Rossay Road, the end of Fairville Boulevard. It's considered almost, that buffer between commercial and light industrial, where it doesn't quite meet the light industrial intent, but it does more align with the lighter commercial uses.
Okay, no risk that needs an additional condition.
No.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Any other members have questions? Thank you. This time, we'll ask the applicant to come forward if they could state their name and whether they've read staff recommendation and if they've got, whether they're in agreement.
Chairman, committee members, Rick Turner with Canterbury Developments. I've been working with Hughes Surveys on this and helping SPCA basically come up with a location for a new facility. Also here this evening, Sarah Parsons, who's the president of SPCA, the local SPCA, and Joan Richardson, who's the shelter manager, who I've been working pretty closely with. When I was asked by the shelter manager to go out and discuss their facilities and their future plans, I was almost shocked at what I found because of a bunch of buildings scattered around, not very energy efficient. The compound for dogs outside is right up adjacent to Bayside Drive, so we're definitely in need of a new facility. We're certainly in agreement with the staff recommendation. Any questions, I can certainly try to address those.
Hi, Rich. Just curious, you have the top of the berm at 48.5, so obviously you don't want people to see them, but I didn't see any reference to anything else on the drawing, like how high a berm is that compared to what's behind it?
The berm, it's going to be a natural feature. It's sort of coming up. It'll be roughly the elevation of the parking area next door for the commercial facility,
Okay,
CarQuest.
so it's quite high. It's going to block the parking lot in behind it.
Yes,
Okay.
And,
I was
the
only
in-
curious too.
yes. And the intent of the layout is to have the parking right beyond the berm. Beyond that, the building, and then you'll see that we have the compound for dogs in particular behind the building. It's away from traffic. It's far enough back that the building shields it from transport trucks coming in, loading, unloading. So, there's enough traffic out there that animals, dogs in particular, if noise is there constant, they just blank it out. It's the movement that really sets them off. So I think we've got a great layout for their future facility.
That's a great spot for it.
Any other committee members have questions? I have one question. Is in regards to the design of the build, you've got 2 storage sheds back there. Is there any reason why you wouldn't incorporate that in the building or into just one storage shed? Or what's the purpose of the 2 storage sheds, I guess? is the
Well,
question.
the one storage shed is definitely required, and then they figured if they outgrew it some way, have a provision for a second one. Doing a larger one and then maybe not using it all just seemed to defeat the purpose. But there are things there that shouldn't be inside the main building, so that's the idea of the shed.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? A second call, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? Last final call, is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Any committee members have any questions for staff or any? I have a motion. Do I have a seconder? Peter. Question? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Thank you. Item 5.4, we will welcome back Phil. There we are there. Close this. All right, so item 5.4, municipal plan amendment and rezoning. Applicant is John Debley. Landowner is John Debley. Location is 0 Bayside Drive, PID 55228134. Existing plan, rural resource and parks and natural areas outside the primary development area. Proposed plan designation is rural, residential, and park and natural areas outside the primary development area. Existing zoning, rural. Proposed zoning, rural, residential, and park. Application type is municipal plan amendment and rezoning. The Community Planning Act authorized the Planning Advisory Committee to give its views to Common Council concerning proposed amendments to the municipal plan and zoning bylaw. Common Council will consider the committee's recommendation at a public hearing on Monday, March 24th, 2025. Thomas.
Thank you. Again, the application seeks to rezone the developable portions of the property from rural to rural residential. This requires an amendment to the municipal plan to redesignate the developable areas from rural resource to rural residential. Due to provincially designated wetlands, the 6,644 square meter portion of the subject site towards the back would remain park and natural area designation. The municipal plan amendment and rezoning would permit the development of 2-phased rural residential neighborhood, with phase 1 involving 12 dwelling units in total, 4 being single-family homes and 4 duplexes. The street would be privately owned. Subject property is located within the mostly rural Redhead neighborhood on the city's southeast side. The southern edge of McAllister Industrial Park is also located along Bayside Drive, which ends approximately 800 meters from the subject property. The property is also located directly south of lands used for pit and quarry operations, including an active quarry located approximately 90 meters from the subject site. The subject site is located near to the intersection of Bayside Drive and Hewitt Road. It is an undeveloped lot containing only an access which crosses the ditching along Bayside Drive to reach the property. There is an active quarry within 900 meters of the subject site. 90 meters of the subject site. This photo shows the access to the property on the right of the photo, and the access, a separate access on the left of the photo is the separate entrance for the quarry. Subject site and surrounding properties are designated rural resource area. The portions of the subject site and surrounding properties that are provincially recognized wetlands are again designated park and natural areas. The applicant is seeking to redesignate the subject property from rural resource to rural residential within the municipal plan. This would be the most appropriate designation when considering the proposed subdivision and its location within the city. Municipal plan policies provide guidance for limited rural residential development, with the overall goal being to maintain the rural character of the area, limit land use conflict, and ensure that the rural resource area can be primarily used for resource-related activities, including forestry operations, wind and solar energy, agriculture, fisheries, and other extraction activities. Policy LU4 requires that the municipal plan amendments are only considered if they align with the city's overall planning goals. The nearest instance of rural residential designation is located about 500 meters from the subject property. The surrounding properties are designated rural resource, which are intended for resource-based development, including agriculture, fisheries, forestry, and resource extraction. The extent with which the rural residential designation is utilized in the Redhead neighborhood and other rural neighborhoods in the city are fixed in nature as mandated within the municipal plan. Municipal plan directs that the rural residential designation is not used to establish new residential development in our rural areas. Policy LU 106, the proposed development does not align with this policy as it would exceed the development allowances for the rural residential designation, which limits the creation of no more than 2 lots from a host parcel. The proposed development would include the creation of 8 lots and 9 part lots in Phase 1 along a private road. This is in contradiction to this policy. Policy I2, the proposed development would be located less than 90 meters from an active quarry, creating a conflict between residential use and quarry operations. As the pit and quarry zone requires a 200-meter setback for quarries from residential zone lots, this development could render the quarry non-compliant with zoning regulations, potentially limiting its future operations and expansions. The Department of Environment and Local Government has also raised concerns citing setback guidelines at the provincial level designed to minimize environmental impacts, which include a required 600-meter distance from drinking water wells and 100 meters from structures such as residential houses. Policy MS5 is concerned with whether development is being focused within the primary development area. The subject site is located outside the primary development area, and rural residential development outside the primary development area is meant to be focused to the existing rural settlement areas and not intended to establish new residential neighborhoods within our rural areas of the city. Again, the subject property is currently zoned rural, which supports resource-based activities like agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, with limited residential use to avoid disrupting resource operations. Subject property is located adjacent to land zone pit and quarry. This includes 1925 Bayside Drive and the existing quarry operation located at 1875 Bayside Drive. Section 12.4(3)(a) of the PQ zone, the pit and quarry zone, sets minimum setback standards to minimize land use conflicts in the rural areas as previously mentioned. This application is seeking to rezone the subject property from rural to rural residential in order to develop the first phase of a 12-unit residential development. Proposed rezoning would establish a rural residential property within 90 meters of an operational quarry. This does not align with the established setbacks as mentioned in the PQ zone, as well as the distance from an existing rural residential neighborhood located over 500 meters away. Letters are mailed out to property owners within 100 meters of the subject site on February 7th. No letters were received as of this presentation. The public notice for the public hearing will be posted on the city's website on March 3rd, and the public hearing for this application will be on March 24th. Staff are recommending denying the redesignation of Schedule A of the municipal development plan from rural resource area to stable area, and denying the redesignation of Schedule B of the municipal development plan from rural resource to rural residential. Staff also recommends denial of the rezoning of the subject property from rural to rural residential. Thank you.
Thank you. Many members have questions for staff? Ann?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And so on the map, there's like a 500 meters away or so, there's another rural residential like cluster of zonings. Are they part of one of the historic settlement neighborhoods, or are they just like independent one-off spot zones?
So there's the rural settlement zone and there's the rural residential zone. The one rural settlement area that comes to mind, there are a few, is like
There's
Martin.
Treadwell Lake, Martinon, and Lorneville. This is not some historic part of that or something different that I
No,
missed.
this
Okay.
would just be rural residential, which is found pretty commonly throughout the rural areas.
Okay.
It's been our policy to keep the rural residential contained more or less. If there's an adjoining lot, then there's a bit of context. Or if there's an empty lot surrounded by rural residential, there's a bit more context for the rezoning. But
Thank you, that's helpful.
Thank you. Any other, Jerry, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if you can answer this, but is the quarry owned by the same people that are applying for this,
no,
or do you know?
no, not according to my records, no.
And the other question is, I've never seen the provincial government be involved so much in something as they're involved in this. Can the provincial government overrule PAC and council, I guess?
That is correct. With the adoption of the new statements of public interest from the province in 2023, there's more guidelines around what their expectations are for municipalities, both urban and rural. And one of those is, making sure that resource extraction is not impeded, but at the same time, making sure that our urban boundaries are kept tighter within New Brunswick. As a result of that, there are instances of other municipalities agreeing to rezoning that conflicted with the provincial statements of public interest. And the province ultimately denied that rezoning and refused to register it as a result.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other committee members have questions? Thank you. At this time, I'll ask the applicant to come forward, and if you could state your name. Should we start a timer? I'm just wondering.
John Depley.
John, welcome.
Good afternoon, committee members, chairman. So it's not showing up there. Oops. So regarding our request, some main points I'd like to go over. Keep in mind, the required setbacks apply to the pit and quarry owner, not to the adjacent rural property owner. So it's in the section it's in is 12 or 12. It states that the quarry must adhere to these. These setbacks don't apply to the adjacent property owner. So to apply these setbacks to the property, and just a moment, I'm going to set my clock here so I don't run out of time. Yeah, so to misapply it, you're indirectly shifting the setbacks to the rural property owners. For example, the 600-meter setback required for distance from wells from quarries. That effectively means there's a large amount of what's allowed even under rural, let alone rural residential, that can't be done. So I'm going to get into that more. Secondly, provincial standards are not identified in legislation. I spoke to Mr. Glenn and in charge of pits and quarries for the province, And he told me that it's not based in legislation, it's a guideline. I said, is there a section of the legislation that it's based on? He said, no. I said, is there any, can you point the science out to me? Can you point me to research articles? Can you point me to a textbook, an engineering textbook, a planning textbook? He said, no. He said, we came up with the 600 meters for distance from wells, but just amongst our team up here, I guess in Fredericton. He said, it's not based in any science. He said, there's no journal or article I can refer to, and it's not based in legislation. He said, it's a guideline. So also, please keep in mind that our proposal is going to contribute to solving the housing shortage. It's going to generate at least $4 million in economic benefits. It's going to increase the tax base. There'll be absolutely no cost to the infrastructure or service costs to the city of St. John. This is a view of the property, and you can see, hopefully you can see in the background the Partridge Island, the breakwater in south end of the city in the harbor. It's a beautiful spot, and the initial phase 1 is about 9 acres. It's a gentle upslope. I think it's about a little over 3 degrees. And I've been asked by many professionals when I'm going to develop, why I haven't developed it, because it has so much potential. There's the quarry that Mr. Llewellyn was referring to. I think it's around 200 acres. I think it goes 1.5 kilometers from Bayside Drive, towards Black River, Proud Road. And I think it's about 630 meters wide. And you can see it looks to be about maybe barely halfway through. In the city bylaws, it states that pits and quarries are not intended to be permanent. And so I'm asking partly, when does temporary become permanent? They're supposed to be permanent in nature. They still have another 750 meters to go. Absence of setbacks show to the pits and quarries haven't maintained show the number of properties affected. Okay, all right. So, that's the. Having a little. What's that? Oh, okay. All right. All right, so the 600 meter setback required, this is what's allowed under rural, but this is not allowed because a pit and quarry is there. So if I go back to this, if you go 600 meters and you go around the property, the quarry, just on the southeast side, that would be the right hand side. That gobbles up about 200 acres that no structures can be built, no wells can be drilled. About $500,000 in property value is basically wiped out. So I calculated that on the southeast side. If you go around all 4 sides, I'm not sure what it would be. $1.5–2 million are affected. So the legislation, first off, it applies to pits and quarries. It doesn't apply. The St. John bylaws on the setbacks have been taken, I guess, from the province because they're identical. And the province has told me, Mark Glenn has told me, it's not based in legislation, and it's not. You can't reference any science behind it. So if on the southeast side, if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 properties over it, that's how much it grabs. So that just for a reference, it's 630 is the in green, and the distance that you could drill a well would have to be almost that distance, 600, all the way around, all 4 sides. So, benefits for the city. The required setbacks apply to the pit and quarry owner, not to the adjacent rural property owner. That's absolutely ironclad. If you look at the legislation, the section with the setbacks is the pit and quarry section. It indirectly shifts the setbacks to the rural property owners. Provincial standards are not identified in legislation. It contributes to, this project will contribute to solving the housing shortage, will generate at least $4 million in economic benefits, and again mentioned increased tax base and no financial burden on the city. Final comments, we're willing to work with the city staff, pit and quarry owners to come up with solutions. For example, landscaping solutions such as tree lines, berms, etc. We're willing to compromise, rearrange lots to provide more distance from pit and quarry. And the goal will be to, I didn't finish that, the goal will be to, provide maximum benefit and to work with all stakeholders. No objections were received, none from the public notices from the pit and quarry owners. So we're interested in coming up with solutions that afford, and this is the key, equal or greater public health and safety than specified by the city bylaws. So if my goal here is to, one of the main points to get across is that we're willing to work with all interesting parties, and the quarries haven't objected, which really is they've given us permission. They haven't raised any objections. So that would be my final comments, and thanks very much.
Thank you. I appreciate your
Okay.
comments. Do committee members have questions for the applicant? Looks like we do not have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak for or against this application? Second call. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? And third and final call. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? At this time, we will close public hearing. And at this time, I'll open it up for committee to have comments or motions or comments.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a question for staff. If they could maybe speak to some of Mr. Debley's comments about setbacks, who they pertain to, what the best practices are, how they're determined for the city. Thanks.
It really depends on the use. The best practices would be to separate the most, for lack of a better word, noxious or potentially dangerous or irritating uses away from residential as much as possible. I would say maybe for the reasons that no one would prefer, I mean, not no one, but, it's maybe less desirable to live next to an active quarry. For instance, with the provincial setbacks, to be honest, I haven't had enough time to dig into them. They were sent about 2 weeks ago. But it does follow a train of thought, limiting wells within proximity to quarries that could potentially negatively affect someone's drinking water is pretty high on the priority list. For best practices in terms of setbacks, we do take an analysis of across Canada, how are other municipalities doing this? How are they handling these conflicts? Every municipality is a bit different. And so, of course, with those, we take into consideration what the context is in St. John. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to set the tone of some of this, here's where I know, it's outside of our PDA, this application. It's not in a historic settlement area where we would typically encourage, clusters of residential to be added. And then it's abutting, it has a land use conflict with the industrial park and, proximity to an industrial park and proximity to a pit and quarry. So, yeah, I have an issue that's just based on history of what we're finding now, even coming up with the city now with current land use conflicts that are happening between the two. It's probably irresponsible to encourage more of that. But if you could, I guess I'm trying to figure out the buffers that we came up with that are in city, in the city's bylaws and rules, are they based on the provincial or are they independently derived?
I personally can't speak to it. The bylaw was adopted in 2016, which was before I was in here, so I'm not sure what the rationale specifically for the pit and quarry was. I would say our pit and quarry does mimic the provincial legislation or the guidelines from what I saw. And then
And if I remember correctly, I think either the zoning bylaws or the municipal plan are both were peer reviewed, so,
yeah,
okay.
they go through quite a bit of a vetting process.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, unfortunately, I do not have that answer at the moment of what the rationale was behind the original pit and quarry adoption.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Any other committee members have questions for staff? I'll look for a motion or a recommendation. Move. Do I have a seconder? I have a seconder. Question? All those in favor? Those opposed? One opposed. Thank you very much. Item 6 is new business. Next meeting of the Planning Advisory will be held on March 18th. I will not be here. Well, the chair will be Phil Como. So I'll look for a motion for adjournment. Jerry? And Peter? All those in favor? Thank you. I knew you wanted to second it, Peter.